Well, bondholders and first-time home buyers are hoping that they'll get some kind of a reprieve this ahead of the holidays, with the South African Reserve Bank MPC expected to cut interest rates this afternoon. We speak to property experts about what this means for homeowners and those shopping for their first property. Our business editor, Xolani Mbanjwa, is out there. He's speaking to various stakeholders. Good afternoon to you, Xolani. Of course, a much anticipated announcement coming in much less than an hour, a couple of hours now. What are people saying on the ground? What are they expecting to hear from the SARB governor, and how do they think this will impact their cash flows?
Good afternoon, Audrey. Well, it's quite an important time for South Africans and the consumers, because it is indeed something that is important, that the MPC must give some reprieve. And the property market, the property sector, is such an important sector. That's where you feel it the most. That's where many South Africans are actually feeling the heat the most. A lot of them are behind on their credit commitments, particularly on home loans. But I'm not the expert on this. We've been speaking to a lot of experts who are estate agents, who are car dealers. I'm speaking now to the part of the sector that is home loans. I'm speaking to Mfundo Mabaso, who is the head of product at FNB Home Loans. Mr. Mabaso, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Let's talk about your expectations and what exactly an interest rate cut would mean to bondholders and first-time home buyers who are under financial pressure, and interest rates are such an important thing to them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Xolani, and thank you for coming to our home here in Fairland. I think we're expecting a cut. I think if we look at what the projections are looking like, it's going to be a 25 basis point cut, which should give some reprieve to existing homeowners in particular, because then their repayment is going to reduce, and other credit that they might hold will also reduce, which will give them a little bit of breathing room and a little bit more cash flow to do a lot more. If we look at customers that have been at the door waiting to come into the market, most of them were failing because the interest rate was just too high. And so from an affordability point of view, they weren't passing. With each cut, more and more customers come into the market. Our calculated estimation is about 4%, an increase in new applications that actually do come through the door as a result of each rate cut at about 25 basis points.
We spoke earlier to an estate agent who was giving us an example that on a 1 million rand bond over 20 years, if there's a 25 basis point cut, there's going to be 175 rand saving per month. On a 50 basis point cut, there could be 350 rands thereabouts per month in savings. If you take that over a full year, it is quite a sizable amount of money. Let's talk about 1.5 million rand bond over 20 years. If we see this afternoon a 25 basis point cut or a 50 basis point cut, what would they be saving per month?
So it could be anything from about 200, 250 rand, and that's a substantial amount of money. And if you look at collectively a household that has more than just a home loan, maybe a car, credit card, and other debt that they might be paying, with this interest rate reduction, that could mean 1,000 rand back into that household's pockets, which means they can do a lot more. They can pay off school fees, pay for uniform, or take a bit of a holiday. Who doesn't need one? And I think just the quality of life with a lower interest rate is so much better. We don't foresee a 50 basis point. We would love one. It would be good for customer. It would be good for the markets. But we think a 25 basis points is going to be the prudent approach that the MPC is going to take. And we think that that's then going to play out with another one in the year, and that should really bode well for new customers coming in and existing customers. Very important that the existing customer is already feeling the pinch. I think you said it. Even those who are falling behind with a interest rate reduction, with this cash flow, they can pay back the arrears that they're falling back into. So it really is good for customers when this is. So we're waiting with bated breath.
The national average is even higher when it comes to defaults, because this year we've seen a 23% of home defaults as opposed to a normal 15%. I have a really important question for you. A lot of South Africans are asking that why, when the Reserve Bank increases interest rates even 2 days before a home loan installment is going off their banks, they immediately, all banks immediately implement that interest rate increase. You see it in your bank account. But when there's an interest rate cut, like the one we saw in September, we don't see banks immediately, all of them, or even financial institutions like SA Home Loans, cutting immediately. You don't see it in your... What is the reason behind that?
Well, Xolani, I can't speak for the industry, unfortunately, but from an FNB point of view, we make sure that we align our changes very closely to the changes that might happen with the MPC. So, for instance, what's going to happen today is that when the announcement goes in, our systems are going to kick it in. By midnight today, that is going to be in the process. So any debit order that runs after today is going to be taking into account the cut. And likewise, unfortunately, when the interest rates do go up, the same thing does go in. I can't talk for the industry, but generally that's what would happen. I imagine that it is a systematic issue that doesn't allow the other players to be able to do this. But what I can assure you of is that the system does cater for the fact that you are owing them less, so we're charging you less interest, even if it doesn't show up in your repayment. So in the next repayment or the next debit order, what would then happen is that you'd see the benefit of that interest rate cut from day one.
Thank you so much. It's quite an interesting one. FNB saying that unlike some financial institutions that fail to cut and implement that interest rate cut with their customers, they actually cut immediately. But what is also interesting, they're expecting an increase in home loan applications of about 4% should there be a 25 basis point cut this afternoon. All eyes on Lesetja Kganyago, the Reserve Bank Governor, and the MPC at 3 p.m. this afternoon when we bring you that particular announcement here on Newzroom Afrika. Back to you in studio, Audrey.
Thank you, Xolani. Just under 2 hours before we hear that announcement from the Reserve Bank Governor, of course, a lot of people hoping for some much anticipated relief.